The golden Christmas tree ornaments reflected the shocked faces around our dining room table as my phone's speaker echoed through the suddenly silent room. Robert Sterling, president of Sterling National Bank, continued speaking in his crisp professional tone, completely unaware that he had just detonated a bomb in the middle of the Martinez family Christmas dinner. Ms. Martinez, congratulations on the approval of your $50 million acquisition loan for the Grandview Medical Center purchase. Your financial portfolio is truly impressive. I've rarely seen such diversified assets in someone your age. The board was unanimous in their approval. My mother, Carmen Martinez, sat frozen with her wine glass halfway to her lips, her perfectly applied red lipstick creating a small O of shock. Around the table 14 family members, aunts, uncles, cousins and my brother Diego, stared at my phone like it might suddenly sprout wings and fly away. "Thank you, Mr. Sterling," I replied calmly, keeping my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I appreciate the expedited process. When can we schedule the closing? We can finalize everything by January 3rd if that works for your timeline. I must say, Sophia, your business acumen is remarkable. Building a healthcare empire while maintaining such strong liquidity, it's exactly the kind of strategic thinking we like to see." Healthcare empire. The words hung in the air like incense, rich and heavy with implications that my family was only beginning to understand. "Perfect. I'll have my legal team contact your office tomorrow to coordinate the final paperwork." I paused, glancing around the table at faces that looked like they'd just witnessed a magic trick. "Have a wonderful Christmas, Mr. Sterling." "You as well, Ms. Martinez. And again, congratulations on becoming the youngest person to ever receive a $50 million commercial loan from our institution. Your parents must be incredibly proud." I ended the call and slipped my phone back into my purse, the silence stretching until it became almost painful. The grandfather clock in the corner ticked loudly, marking seconds that felt like hours. $50 million? My cousin Maria whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft Christmas music still playing from the speakers. I nodded, cutting a piece of my mother's famous Christmas ham as if nothing unusual had happened. Give or take. The medical center acquisition has been in the works for 6 months. Medical center? My father, Eduardo, found his voice first, though it came out rougher than usual. Sophia, what medical center? Grandview Medical Center downtown. It's a 340-bed facility with 3 satellite clinics and a medical research wing. I'm converting it into a comprehensive women's health campus with a focus on maternal and reproductive care. The explanation was met with more silence. I could practically hear their brains trying to process this information, like computers attempting to run software they weren't equipped to handle. My brother Diego, who had been smirking throughout Mom's earlier lecture about my failures, now looked like someone had slapped him. But you work at that little clinic in the suburbs. You're just a nurse practitioner." "I own that little clinic in the suburbs," I corrected gently, along with 4 others across the metropolitan area. They're part of my primary care network that serves over 15,000 patients annually. My Aunt Rosa, who had been particularly vocal about my disappointing career choices during the appetizer course, set down her fork with shaking hands. "You own medical clinics? 5 primary care facilities, 2 urgent care centers, and now the medical center." I took a sip of wine, savoring both the vintage and the moment. "Oh, and I'm the majority investor in 3 medical technology startups that develop equipment for rural healthcare providers." The truth was, I had been building this empire for the past 4 years while my family assumed I was struggling as a simple nurse practitioner. Every family gathering brought fresh waves of concern about my modest lifestyle, and suggestions that I should find a wealthy husband to secure my future. What they didn't know was that I had been living modestly by choice, reinvesting every penny of profit back into expanding my healthcare network. While they worried about my financial security, I had been quietly becoming one of the region's most significant healthcare entrepreneurs. "This is impossible," my mother declared, her voice rising with each word. "We would have known. We monitor You monitor Sophia Martinez's credit reports and bank statements," I interrupted. "You don't monitor Grandview Healthcare Solutions, Phoenix Medical Investments, or Sterling Health Technologies." I pulled out my phone again, this time opening the banking app for my primary business account. The balance displayed made my cousin Carlos choke on his wine. $12.7 million in liquid assets, with a note indicating this was just the operating fund for current projects. 12 million. Diego's voice cracked like he was 13 again. You have $12 million? In this account, I clarified. The total liquid assets across all my business and investment accounts are closer to 43 million. The real estate and medical equipment probably add another 60 million in hard assets. My uncle Fernando, who had spent the entire pre-dinner conversation explaining why I needed to get serious about my career, suddenly looked very pale. Sophia, this changes everything. Does it? I asked, meeting his eyes across the table. Because 30 minutes ago, you were telling me that I was wasting my education and disappointing the family legacy. You said I should consider going back to school for an MBA so I could understand how real business works. The memory of that conversation still stung. Fernando had cornered me by the Christmas tree, wine on his breath and condescension in his voice, explaining how my career in healthcare was noble but impractical, and how I needed to think about building wealth instead of playing nurse. I didn't know, he mumbled. You didn't ask, I replied. None of you asked what I was working on or what my goals were. You just assumed that because I wasn't flashing money around or bragging about my success, I must not have any. My mother set down her wine glass with enough force to make the crystal sing. Sophia Elena Martinez, why didn't you tell us about any of this? The use of my full name was supposed to invoke childhood obedience, but it just reminded me of all the time she had used that same tone to lecture me about my choices. Tell you what exactly? That I was building something significant? I tried. Remember last Christmas when I mentioned wanting to expand my clinic services? You said you wanted to hire another nurse, Mom protested. I said I wanted to expand into comprehensive women's health services and was looking at acquisition opportunities. You told me to be realistic about what a small clinic could accomplish. The memory was crystal clear because it had hurt so much at the time. I had been excited about my plans, ready to share my vision with the family, and had been dismissed before I could even explain the scope of what I was building. You said small clinic, my Aunt Carmen pointed out defensively. Because that's how you always referred to it. Sophia's little clinic. Sophia's modest practice. You never asked about revenue, patient volume, expansion plans, or growth potential. You just assumed small meant unsuccessful. My phone buzzed with a text message. I glanced at it quickly. Ms. Martinez, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from Johns Hopkins. We'd like to discuss your proposal for the medical education partnership. Would you be available for a call this week? I showed the text to the table. Johns Hopkins wants to partner with my medical education program. We're developing a curriculum for rural healthcare delivery that could revolutionize medical access in underserved communities. Diego shook his head slowly. This is insane. How did you do all this without us knowing? By working 18-hour days while you all assumed I was just plain nurse, I replied. By reinvesting profits instead of buying designer clothes and luxury cars. By focusing on building something meaningful instead of impressing people at dinner parties. The irony wasn't lost on me that this revelation was happening at a dinner where I had been lectured about the importance of financial security and making smart life choices. For the past hour, various family members had offered advice about my future, suggestions for improving my prospects, and concerns about my ability to support myself in old age. The money you were cutting me off from, I continued, looking directly at my mother, I haven't touched it in 3 years. The $2,500 you deposit into my account every month? I automatically transfer it to a scholarship fund I established for nursing students from low-income families. My mother's face went through several color changes. You've been giving away our support? I've been using it to support people who actually need it instead of letting it accumulate in an account I never touch. My father finally found his voice again. Sophia, why didn't you just tell us to stop sending the money? Because every time I tried to talk about my financial independence, you changed the subject or suggested I was being overly optimistic about my prospects. It was easier to redirect the money than to have the same conversation over and over. The truth was more complicated than that. Part of me had wanted them to figure it out on their own, to notice that I never asked for money, never complained about financial stress, never seemed worried about bills or expenses. I had wanted them to ask questions, to show interest in my work beyond polite inquiries about my health and whether I was dating anyone. My phone rang again. This time the caller ID showed Governor's office. I looked around the table at 14 pairs of wide eyes. I should probably take this. Governor Martinez speaking, came the familiar voice of our state's governor, a distant cousin who had never shown much interest in my career. Sophia, I hope I'm not interrupting your Christmas dinner. Not at all, Governor. How can I help you? I'm calling about your healthcare access proposal. The State Healthcare Committee has reviewed your plan for rural medical center development, and we're very interested in moving forward. The potential to serve an additional 100,000 residents is exactly what we need. I put the phone on speaker again, unable to resist sharing this moment. That's wonderful news. When would you like to schedule a formal presentation? As soon as possible after the new year. Sophia, I have to ask, is it true that you're funding the entire first phase of development yourself? The initial investment of $35 million, yes. I believe in the project enough to put my own resources behind it. $35 million of your own money for public healthcare access. That's remarkable. Your family must be incredibly proud of your commitment to public service. After ending the call, I looked around the table at faces that registered everything from shock to embarrassment to something that might have been respect. The governor, my Aunt Rosa said faintly. We went to medical school together, I explained. She's been following my work in rural healthcare access for the past 2 years. My mother stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor. I need some air. She walked out onto the back patio, and I could see her silhouette through the French doors, her shoulders shaking in what might have been crying or laughter or both. My father followed her, leaving me with 12 family members who looked like they were trying to solve calculus problems in their heads. Sophia, my cousin Elena said quietly, I owe you an apology. Earlier when I suggested you should consider dating my boss's son because he's a doctor and could elevate your status. You didn't know, I said, though the memory of that conversation still irritated me. Elena had cornered me during cocktail hour, explaining how Dr. Martinez, no relation, was successful and established, and how it might be good for me to marry up, since my career had limited earning potential. But I should have, she continued. I should have asked about your work, your goals, your achievements. Instead, I just assumed. You assumed that because I don't wear designer clothes or drive a luxury car, I must be struggling, I finished. You all did. Diego leaned forward, his expression serious for the first time all evening. Sophia, why do you live in that small apartment if you have this kind of money? Because it's close to my clinics, it's comfortable, and I don't need much space. Why do you live in that mansion if you're always complaining about mortgage payments? He blinked, clearly not having expected the question to be turned back on him. Because it's what successful people do. According to who? Diego, you spend 60% of your income on housing and car payments to maintain an image. I spend 12% of my income on housing and invest the rest in building something that will last. My uncle Fernando cleared his throat. Sophia, about what I said earlier about getting an MBA? You said I needed to learn how real business works, I reminded him. You suggested that healthcare was a soft industry that didn't require serious business skills. I was wrong. You were condescending, I corrected. There's a difference. Wrong implies you didn't have enough information. Condescending means you assumed I couldn't possibly know more than you did. The distinction was important to me. I had spent years being talked down to by family members who assumed that my choice to work in healthcare meant I didn't understand finance, business strategy, or wealth building. My parents returned from the patio, both looking like they'd aged a decade in the past hour. My mother's makeup was smudged and my father's usually perfect hair was disheveled. Sophia, my mother said, her voice smaller than I'd heard it since I was a child, can we talk? Privately. We went into my father's study, a room lined with law books and family photos. The picture on his desk showed the 4 of us at my nursing school graduation. Me beaming in my cap and gown, my parents looking proud but slightly concerned about my career choice. I'm sorry, my mother said immediately. About tonight, about the things I said, about everything. What specifically are you sorry about? I asked, settling into the leather chair across from my father's desk. She looked surprised by the question. For not supporting your career choices. Mom, you supported my career choice. You just didn't think it would amount to anything significant. That's not. It is though. You were proud of me for becoming a nurse practitioner, but you were also worried that it wasn't enough. You wanted me to find security through marriage or family money because you didn't believe my work could provide real financial independence. My father joined the conversation, his lawyer instincts kicking in. Sophia, we were trying to protect you. Healthcare is a difficult field and we wanted to make sure you had backup plans. Backup plans for what? Failure? Dad, did you have backup plans when you started your law practice? That's different. How? He opened his mouth to answer, then closed it again. We all knew how it was different. His parents had never suggested he might need to marry someone wealthy to secure his future. I built something incredible, I continued, and you missed it entirely because you were so focused on what I didn't have that you never looked at what I was creating. My mother sat down heavily in the chair next to mine. Tell us about it. Really tell us. Everything we missed. So I did. For the next hour, I explained how I had started with one small clinic and grown it into a network that served thousands of patients. I told them about the technology investments, the medical equipment innovations, the partnerships with universities and government agencies. I shared my vision for rural healthcare access and the scholarship programs I had funded. You've built an empire, my father said when I finished. I've built something that matters, I corrected. The money is a side effect of solving important problems. My mother reached over and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Mija. I should have said that years ago. You did say it. But you said it like you were proud of me for trying, not proud of me for succeeding. When we returned to the dining room, the rest of the family was still sitting around the table, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Instead of the casual chatter that usually filled family gatherings, everyone looked thoughtful and somewhat subdued. Sophia, my cousin Carlos said as we sat down, can I ask you something? About business, I mean. Sure. I've been thinking about starting a consulting company, but I wasn't sure if I had enough experience. After hearing about what you've accomplished, would you mind looking at my business plan sometime? It was the first time any family member had ever asked for my professional opinion on anything more complex than which insurance plan to choose. I'd be happy to, I replied. Email it to me next week. Over the next hour, the conversation gradually shifted from shock and apologies to genuine curiosity about my work. My Aunt Rosa asked about healthcare policy. Diego wanted to understand medical technology investments. My cousin Maria, who was finishing nursing school, asked about career development strategies. It felt strange to be seen as the expert in the room instead of the family member who needed guidance and protection. As the evening wound down and relatives began leaving, each one made a point of speaking to me privately. Some offered apologies for their earlier assumptions. Others asked about collaboration opportunities or investment advice. A few simply said they were proud of me and sorry they hadn't recognized my achievements sooner. My parents walked me to my car, the modest Honda Civic that had been the subject of much family concern over the years. Sophia, my father said, I want you to know that we're going to handle things differently from now on. No more unsolicited advice about your life choices. And no more financial support, my mother added. We understand now that you don't need it and we should have realized that years ago. I hugged them both, feeling like we were meeting each other for the first time as adults. There is one thing I'd like to ask for, I said as I got into my car. Anything, my mother said immediately. Trust. Trust that I know what I'm doing, that I've thought through my choices, and that I'm capable of building something meaningful. I don't need you to understand every decision I make, but I need you to believe that I'm competent to make them. My father nodded slowly. We can do that. As I drove home to my small apartment, I reflected on how dramatically the evening had changed. I had started the night as the family disappointment who needed to be cut off from support and guided toward better choices. I was ending it as a successful entrepreneur who other family members wanted to learn from and collaborate with. The money and the business success felt good, but the real victory was being seen for who I actually was instead of who they thought I should become. My phone buzzed with a text from Diego. Hey sis, I've been thinking about what you said about spending versus investing. Would you be willing to help me restructure my finances? I think I've been doing this all wrong. I smiled, typing back, of course. But fair warning, my financial advice involves a lot less flash and a lot more patience than what you're used to. I'm ready to learn, he replied. Maybe the best Christmas gift wasn't the $50 million loan approval or the governor's call or even the family's newfound respect. Maybe it was the possibility of having relationships based on who we actually were instead of who we thought we were supposed to be. 3 months later, I stood in the lobby of the newly renovated Grandview Medical Center, watching patients receive care in facilities that had been empty and abandoned just months before. My family attended the grand opening ceremony, not because they felt obligated to support me, but because they were genuinely excited about what I had built. My mother cut the ribbon with me, and when the local news reporter asked her about her daughter's success, she didn't mention how proud she was that I had finally found my way. Instead, she talked about my vision, my business acumen, and my commitment to improving healthcare access. It was worth the wait.